Asus and Alcatel have been pretty victorious in what they delivered in the Zenfone 2 and the Onetouch Idol 3 respectively, but now it's Huawei's turn to show consumers what it could counter with. We've already seen its high-end offering in the P8, but now we have a more competitively priced version of that handset with the Huawei P8 Lite. Obviously, we know what a Lite model entails, but let's hope this one can be a contender in this new premium mid-range segment. Hey guys, John V from PhoneArena here, and you're watching our video review of the Huawei P8 Lite. The P8 Lite stays true to the P8 style by employing the same design language, one that's uniformly flush with its surfaces. Throw in its 7.7mm ultra-thin profile, it's an attractive thing to look at. Gone though is the unibody metal design, replaced instead by a unibody plastic one, which does nice to emulate a brushed metal finish, but still undeniably plastic. Even though it looks like the P8, it's instantly noticeable that the premium feel is lost with its plastic construction. As its name implies, the P8 Lite scales back accordingly to offer a 5-inch 720x1280 IPS LCD display with Gorilla Glass 3. Now that's smaller and lower res than the screens in the Asus Zenfone 2 and Alcatel Onetouch Idol 3. But its pixel density of 294 pixels per inch still produces enough detail and sharpness to make it effective. That's where pretty much the good ends, because the display is accompanied with some inferior qualities, like its disturbingly cold color temperature of 85-36 Kelvin, its poor color accuracy, visible distortion at wide angles, and its lackluster 380 nit luminance. This translates to a screen that appears colder in tone and not necessarily the best with outdoor visibility. With various shades of magenta, in fact, they appear more blue than anything else. It's just boring, honestly. Despite launching after the P8, this phone is running a slightly older version of Huawei's customized Android experience, the Emotion UI 3.0, rather than version 3.1. Worse yet, it's running on top of Android 4.4.4 KitKat 2, which is unacceptable for any new phone to launch this late without Lollipop in tow, at the very least. Experience here doesn't differ from what we've seen in the P8 previously, as its standouts includes the elimination of the app panel, where everything is just placed on the home screen. The result is an interface that's cluttered and disorganized. On the surface though, it still has all the useful functions and qualities of any Android smartphone, but it's really not the type to appease power users. Adios Kirin. For its US release, Huawei decided to power this variant of the P8 Lite with an octa-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 615 chip coupled with 2GB RAM and the Adreno 405 GPU. Strangely though, it exhibits some lag while navigating across the home screen. Therefore, it doesn't really surprise us that the phone's performance clearly suffers with graphics processing. Armed with a 13-megapixel Sony sensor, which features an f2.2 aperture lens, BSI, and an LED flash, it puts the Huawei P8 Lite in the same scope as the Alcatel Onetouch Idol 3 and the Asus Zenfone 2. Around the front, it's sporting a 5-megapixel snapper. Running the camera app, it's offering the same styled interface that we saw in the P8, but when we look at it closely, it's attached with a fewer shooting modes. Now the staple ones are there, such as panoramic, HDR, best photo, all focus, watermark, beauty, and a wide selfie panoramic. But it just doesn't have the diversified low lighting and manual modes of the P8. We're generally content with the quality of its outdoor shots, those taken when there's abundance of lighting. Images have good detail, but colors are more on the flat side and it seems to struggle with dynamic range. That's where its HDR mode comes into play by balancing out the exposure to produce an evenly exposed image without the overblown or artificial colors that some other phones deliver. It even handles macro and panoramic shots with ease. However, the camera's quality takes the usual dip under low light, where details are smudgy, noise becomes evident, and blurring becomes more profound. Its 1080p video quality as a whole isn't as good as its still image capture. It once again has a tougher time dealing with dynamic range since it seems to favor an overexposed composition. And we don't like that it lacks continuous autofocus and has a jumpy exposure adjustment. We know the P8 is built for serious photographers, but the P8 Lite, much like its name, offers simple and easy photo taking. While it's not a home run in all areas, it still carries a few great qualities with its package. Huawei's own custom music player is preloaded with the phone, which by today's standards is pretty bare bones with its look and functionality. Audio output through its speaker reaches a whopping 79 decibels, but despite the impressive mark, it still sounds too high-pitched and shrill in tone. So don't expect the most pleasant experience unless you put it into the middle volume setting. Although it's more than capable of playing back 1080p video with ease, it's just a dull looking display for the occasion. We've just seen better. Voices through the earpiece have some substance behind them, making it easy for us to comprehend things even in noisy conditions. On the other end line, our callers are able to listen to us with nearly the same amount of ease, but they claim that there's a sprinkling of distortion. Internally, there's a 2200 mAh battery giving the P8 Lite juice to run. Its battery life is a bit less than its esteemed rivals, primarily due to the lower capacity. For day-to-day use, it gets us through a workday, but something that needs additional juicing for us to continue using it into the night. While in our battery benchmark test, it achieves a mark of 5 hours and 30 minutes, which is pretty bad considering we set the display to 170 nits in our testing, as opposed to the usual 200 nits. The Huawei P8 Lite marks a new direction for the company, one that follows the path of being sold outright and unlocked through various retail channels, much like the strategy of Asus and Alcatel too. On paper, the $250 price of the P8 Lite is an attractive one that commands attention, but knowing what the Asus Zenfone 2 and Alcatel Onetouch Idol 3 have to offer respectively at roughly the same price, it's tough to justify going with the Huawei P8 Lite. Not only from a specs point of view, but also from a performance standpoint. This one has a 720p screen, the other two have 1080p ones. This one has Android 4.4 KitKat, while the others have Android 5.0 Lollipop. See what we're getting at here?